Hi students, I am creating this video for you. This is a new type of teaching and learning style called the flipped classroom. So you watch this video before you come to the class. It's a short lecture. And then when you come to class, you're going to do the workshop number 4, which is a farm planning exercise. I think you're going to enjoy it, and there's a little competition involved. So please watch this video before you come to class. So this is our lecture. And I'm just going to go through it briefly. You definitely need to go through the lecture on your own time and read specifically the words. So this talks about farming operations. Here we can see a big irrigation machine that rolls through the land and waters the crops. So this is using technology or capital-intensive farming production methods in order to maximize our output of production. So in this lecture, we're going to talk about what is a farm manager and how do they make economic decisions. We're going to understand about profitability and revenue. We're going to talk about enterprise selection or choosing which crops or activities you have on your farm, and you're going to do some calculations. So here's my farm picture. It's a pretend farm, of course. Maybe this is from Farmville. So here we see various activities on the farm. We see the barn, which holds the animals. We see vegetables production. We see flowers production. We see, I think this is alfalfa being grown in the back. I have a wheat production here. I also see alternative energy. We can see that the farmers, they also have their own water supply. We see lots of animals, and even we see a restaurant in the back. So this is a very diverse farm, meaning that they have all different farming activities or enterprises going on at one time. So actually, some principles of farm management is how does the farm manager use his inputs in the best possible way, given the natural resources and capital or man-made factors like tractors or technology, and how does he use those inputs to transform them into outputs, to grow the corn, to produce the milk, etc. So actually the farmer, he has to decide how to use his factors of production. And remember, the factors of production are land, labor, capital, and management. And this is based on his managerial skills. How does he manage his inputs? So farming is like any other business, but actually the decision-making for the farmers is a bit harder than other normal businesses like producing clothes or iPhones, because actually farming is very uncertain, and there's certain risks that we have in farming that the farmers, they cannot control. So actually, the farmer, he uses his inputs. Here's a model that says here's the man-made or capital inputs, here are the natural or natural resources, and he's the manager. He must utilize those inputs or factors of production in order to create his farm output. So here, students, we see a picture of a farm. In the background, I can see the silo, and this is where they store all the feed for the cows, because the cows eat a lot. Here is the home for the cows. These are the man-made factors. And then the inputs, or the natural resources, is the land in which we need for the cows to roam, to live on, and to eat the grass. And we can see that the output of these man-made and natural factors is going to be the milk. So farm managements, they have lots of problems to solve, and they must be organized, and they have to consider from an economic point of view the 4 economic questions. What should we produce? Well, what should we produce? We have to look at our natural resources. What's available? Here in the UAE, we can produce dates fairly easily given the soil and the dryness of the weather. How can we produce? Well, we need to decide, do we want to use laborers, or should we invest in a tractor or in a capital machinery or technology? Well, we have to look at the cost. Which is more efficient? Using laborers in the UAE is still more efficient than investing in machinery. For example, in Europe and in the United States or North America, it's more cost-effective to invest in machines, especially because the farms are very large there. So how much should we produce? Well, how much should we produce? This is a very specific question from the production function. We want to produce where the costs are the lowest. The costs are the lowest and our profits are the highest. So when should we buy and sell? Well, this is according to the markets, or according to when my products are coming to harvest. So for example, apples, they only come to harvest 1 time per year. So I need to sell my apples in the fall when my apples are ready for production. So farm management is operating the farm business, all coordination of the laborers, the managers, the materials, and the processes that I need in order to achieve my goals. My goals are to manage my enterprises. Perhaps I have one enterprise and I have one big farm and I'm producing as much quantity as I can given my inputs. Or perhaps I have several different activities that I must manage at the same time. For example, in our first picture, growing the flowers, growing the vegetables, managing the animals, managing the restaurant. The main objective of all farm managers is to maximize profit. So in order to maximize profits, we should understand this profit equation. So actually, I want to increase my revenues or decrease my cost in order to increase my profits. So this equation I always use, revenues minus cost equals profits. So in order to decrease my costs will increase my profits because I lower the amount that I need to pay to produce. This is generally the rule of thumb of farm management, reducing the costs. So here we have an example. Farmer Fatma, she earns a revenue of 8,000 dirham, but her cost of production is 6,000 dirham. So how much is her profit for 1 month? Well, what is our equation? 8,000 minus 6,000, which equals 2,000. Students, the economics of farm management is in the field of microeconomics, looking at individual businesses or sectors as we've discussed before. And the farm manager, he must or she must decide how to allocate the resources for the best efficiency and effectiveness of the particular farm, their natural resources and their man-made resources, or their factors of production. So the farmers or the farm managers, they must look at the farm, how it works together as one unit. So for example, if I have my enterprises, I need to be able to use the amount of laborers that I have. I need to be able to use the amount of capital that I have in the most efficient way, so that my resources are constantly being utilized, but they are never overlapping. So actually, in order to determine how to use the enterprises, or how to use the resources for the enterprises, then the farm manager must decide which kinds of crops should I grow, which kinds of animals should I be having on my farm, and how can it work together in the most efficient manner. So like we see in the bottom here, the microeconomics uses this type of market model where we have price on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis, and we're looking now at how the manager determines the supply, how much to supply, what to supply, and how to use the resources. So when I talk about enterprise selection, we talk about the projects on the farm. So in our first picture, let me just go back to that. Here we see this farm as a very diverse farm. We have animal production, we have crops production, we have the restaurant production, we have even flowers production. So actually this farm would be considered a very diverse farm. However, the opposite of a diverse farm is using many different enterprises in order to maximize its efficiency. On the other end, we have a monoculture, or we have one farm that produces a lot of the same product like these pictures are showing, and they invest in a big machine or multiple machines in order to maximize the efficiency. So when we talk about the projects on the farm or the activities, we call it enterprise selection, and we want to know how many activities can be going on at the same time or simultaneously. So for example, if a farmer produces corn, soy, hay, and cattle at the same time, he has 4 different enterprises. So in your workshop today, you're going to be managing 3 enterprises for your farm, and then you're going to look at the cost effectiveness of those 3 enterprises. So we want to ensure that those enterprise selection is working together. So here we have a picture. How many enterprises? Well, we have 1, the dairy production. Here we have the bees, that's a honey production. And then we also have crops production. So there's 3 enterprises on this farm, we can say. Oh, there's another one, poultry or eggs production. So in order to maximize my profits, I need to understand about revenue. Remember, my profits are going to come based on the efficiency of using my enterprises. So calculating revenues, as we've looked at before, we take the price of the product or the market price, and then we take the quantity of how many products I'm going to sell. And that gives me the total sales or total revenue. So here I have 3 pumpkins production. So if the farmer sells 3 pumpkins every day, or one day, for 100 dirham each, how much would my revenues be? Correct, 3 times 100. And now we want to know, okay, well, what if they sell every single day in 1 month, 3 pumpkins, and we assume that there's 30 days in 1 month calendar. So how much is my total sales or my total revenue for the month? 9,000. So 300 times 30, I have 9,000, or I have 100 pumpkins and 90 pumpkins per month, 3 per day. So think about that math for a moment. Here's another exercise for you. Farmer Fatma, she has an enterprise mix of strawberries and tomatoes. The market price of strawberries is 30 dirham per kilogram, and the tomatoes are 10 dirham per kilogram. She expects to sell 5 kilos per day of strawberries and 10 kilos of tomatoes per day. So take a moment and figure out what are the prices and what are the quantities of each one of these enterprises. Now I want to think about if I have 30 dirham per kilogram of strawberries and I sell 5 per day, then 30 times 5 plus 10 kilograms or 10 dirham of tomatoes with 10 kilograms sold per day, 10 times 10. If I add up both of those equations, then I should come up with 250. Okay, so take a moment and pause this video in order to understand the math behind the revenues. So just a moment, and I'd like to talk to you about farm sales or revenues versus farm expenses. So here we have data for the United States whole farm sector, or the agricultural industry, and we're looking at all the sales together of the farms. So here we can see the blue line represents sales or revenue, and the red line represents expenses. So is the farm sector in the United States profitable? Well, how can I tell? Well, here we can see that in 1997, the farm sector total revenues brought in $201 billion, but it cost to produce $201 billion of products, farm products. The farmers had to pay $158 billion. So 201 minus 158, that will give me the profit margin, or this area between the blue and the red line. We can see in 2012, the profit margin was less, or the smallest in this time frame. Here we can see that the profits are getting bigger because the distance between the sales and the expenses is growing. Another way we can consider farm expenses is by looking at the composition or the types of expenses that farmers have. So here we can see the largest expense, according to this graphic, is total labor cost. So actually, in all farms, the labor cost is very high. Here we can see the second largest expense is the maintenance for the buildings, or the depreciation. And we will talk about depreciation later. But this is how we write off expenses over time. So just take a moment and go through all these various expenses and see what are the expenses: land, labor, veterinarian, insurance, maybe they have to pay taxes, machinery, animal feed, very high expenses. So here's one more question for you. This is more similar to what we're going to be looking at in the workshop today. So Farmer Fatma, she has an enterprise mix of strawberries and tomatoes, and the market price is given the same as before. But now we want to add in the cost of production to the equation. So I must calculate the revenues and her cost, and then I can calculate the profit. And we can see if Farmer Fatma is making a good use of her resources in her enterprise selection, and is she profitable? So if I add up my revenues minus my cost, then I find my profits. So pause this video for a minute and write out all the equation. Price times quantity is my revenue. Add up the revenue streams for each enterprise, and then you want to identify the cost. So her cost of production is 100 dirham per day. We're assuming, once again, 1 month. Okay, so let's select the correct answer, which is B. So here I can find my revenues from all of my sales is 7,500. I had to pay 3,000 in order to produce those products in 1 month. And then when I take 7,500 minus 3,000, I have my profits of 4,500. So here is back my revenue equation. So I want to minimize my cost. I want to increase my revenue in order to increase my profits.